All right. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Just simply type where you're coming from, where you're watching this session from. Hope you've been enjoying the past day or so of sessions. I know I have. So just tell me where you're coming from, where you're joining us from today, and also the language which you are learning, or the languages which you are learning at the moment. We'll wait a few minutes for people to come in, and we'll get started. So say hello in the chat. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Kate. London, Latvia. Fantastic. And type in the language which you are learning, or the languages which you are learning at the moment. Relearning French. Un très bon choix. English and Japanese. Fantastic. Mary. That's Argentina. Spanish, Italian, West Sussex. I know that part of the world very well. Mary, Italian. Fantastic. And when you type in the chat, make sure it's set to everyone, so that everyone can see your message, so everyone is on the same page. In just a few minutes' time, we'll get started, and I'll explain what on earth this is all about. Anyone else? People joining the chats, just let me know which language you are learning. Teaching German and learning Italian, more Italian. Italian seems to be very popular today. And tell us where you are from as well, where you're joining us from this morning or this afternoon. From London? Great. Hi, Michael. All right, we'll give it another minute or so and then we'll get going. So those joining, just type in the language you are learning and where you are joining us from, or maybe the languages if you're learning more than one at once. So for those just joining, there is a little chat box at the bottom of the page, which you can type in. It says chat. And if you have specific Spanish, if you have specific questions about what I talk about today, put them in the Q&A section. There's a Q&A section, and I will answer these at the end. So as I go through the presentation, if you have any questions which you'd like to have answered, I'll do my very best to do so in the time we've got. Pop them in the Q&A box, and I'll come to them at the end. Spanish. All right, let's begin. Let's begin with this simple question. Can hypnosis boost your language learning? And to answer this question, I'd like to tell you a story. And this story is one which is kind of a little bit of a silly story, really. I like to imagine the scene. 3 British tourists visit the northern French city of Lille. This was about more than 20 years ago. And at the time, it was when, for those that can remember, the Eurostar embarrassingly sort of chugged its way through the south of England before speeding up out the other side in France to reach Paris. So 3 British tourists, a mother, a father, and their son. The son had been learning French for around 6 years by now. And as you do when you visit a new place, you look for somewhere to eat, perhaps a little bit too early, as is always tends to be the case. And they reach an Italian restaurant in Lille. What a good choice. So all goes well. They find their seats, and then the trouble begins, because the waitress comes out and there's a problem, because the son, who had been learning French at this point for quite some time, didn't really understand the menu of an Italian restaurant. Can you imagine that? So it gets a bit serious, because then the manager comes out. She comes out, she puts her hands on the table and says, "Tell me, what do you want?" Quite aggressively for the polite British. And it all goes out the window. Years of language learning goes out the window, unable to order some basic food in the restaurants. And of course, the parents are looking kind of expectantly, saying, "Well, I thought you were good at this. I thought you've done this at school. Surely you should be able to order in a restaurant." Now, for those of you who may have guessed, that 16-year-old boy was me. And thankfully, I didn't give up after that. But I'm sure you've had situations like this in your own experience of learning a language, where you've maybe felt a little bit like you were stupid, you didn't know enough, or you got frustrated with yourself. And if you're a teacher of languages, you've maybe seen it in your students. They may say, languages aren't for me, or I'm too old to learn a language. I'm not a language person. And moments like this, as trivial as they may seem, can quickly add up and create a perception that this isn't for me. This isn't something that I'm going to pursue any longer. And so many people will leave behind learning a language somewhat unnecessarily, due to really a misunderstanding of what's really happening. So who am I? My name is Oliver M. James. I'm actually a clinical hypnotist. So I help people with a range of different issues, including irrational fears, anxiety, smoking, and I love languages. And I initially started hypnosis more as like a party trick in mentally gluing people's hands to tables. But as I looked into it further and I started to do training in it, I realized that behind all the mystery, there lies a very powerful tool for personal change. And you join me today live from Brussels in Belgium, which also as a city is bilingual in a country with 3 official languages, and languages play a big role here. They're very important. So let's have a little look at how I see language learning. And interestingly, I heard about something similar in one of the talks yesterday. I see language learning really a bit like a house, as a metaphor as being a house, because on the outside and on the inside, you have your grammar, which is your structure. You do not have a house if there are no walls. right? You need the grammar. It's very important. There's the vocabulary, which at the beginning, when you move into the house, is often quite sparse and quite disconnected. And it begins to build up, and eventually it can become quite a mess. You don't quite know which word to use when, what goes where, but over time, naturally, it becomes easier. So, and to cap that off, you have the pronunciation, which is really your roof, which allows you to glide through natural conversations with native speakers, which allows you to get through those moments in the restaurant, those moments in front of the class, those moments in the job interview, in meetings, where you can effectively be understood and not having to need to lean in to work out what on earth you're saying. Now, all these things are covered pretty traditionally by a lot of traditional teaching and also apps. There's so many options these days to learn a language. Maybe you use many of them, but there is something which is often missing, which is not talked about. And that is beliefs, confidence, fears, doubts, motivation, and thoughts. And as we grow up as children, we are taught a lot about the external world. We're taught a lot about what's happening out there, how things are. But very little attention is actually paid to what's going on inside and how our perceptions of things can sometimes be a little bit deceiving. So here we come to the elephant in the room, quite literally, hypnosis. What on earth is it? And what is it doing with language learning? And to make one very obvious point, what I'm not talking about here is magically implanting the language in your head. Not worked out how to do that yet. But hypnosis is really a tool, an add-on, a way to boost your language learning, and I'll show you why. Now, if you do a simple Google search for hypnosis, you'll come up with some pretty creepy looking images, right? You'll see weird people in weird suits and puppets and dangling watches and people's heads sort of disconnecting from themselves. This doesn't paint necessarily a very good image of hypnosis. It kind of scares people. And there's probably not one topic in the world which divides people more is hypnosis. Everybody has an opinion on what it is, whether it's real, whether it's a thing. Even academics can't quite agree. So what on earth is it? This is all based, what you see here is based on a cultural and social representation of hypnosis, which today has very little basis in reality. Sure, there are stage shows, and when they're done right, they have their place. But when it comes to making changes, none of this is particularly appealing. Nobody really wants to be sat listening to somebody with a watch dangling in front of their face, or believe they're going to be controlled. Of course not. Who wants that? So language learning is really a journey. And it's a journey which we begin not always knowing where we're going to end up. So it takes patience, it takes time, it takes consistency and curiosity. It takes a little motivation. And our subconscious is that part of us, or unconscious or inner mind, is that part of us which is keeping us going throughout the day. It's the part of us that has fears. It's the part of us that has perceptions about things, about life, about how things are. It's that part of us which will say to us, this isn't for me. I am too old for learning language, or this language is really difficult, or I'm just not very good. I can't get my head around it. The subconscious will tell you these things. So the main message I want to say today is it's never too late to learn. Whatever age you are, whatever ability you have, never give up. As long as you want, as long as you can see the motivation of doing so, then it's worthwhile pursuing. You never know what kind of opportunities it will give you. And hypnosis is really about focus and imagination. Imagination is the language of the unconscious. It's the language that allows us to make changes. Think about this. If you've been to a restaurant and you had in your mind that restaurant was a really good restaurant, all your friends were talking about it, but when you went, you got bad food, you got bad service. Instantly, your perception there and then changes in an instant. It changes everything you then think about that restaurant. So we can do the same with language learning. This has also been proven in far more stressful situations than ordering in a restaurant or speaking in front of a class or speaking in front of some team meeting or something. This has been proven in a lot of clinical settings with pain, nasty operations, where people are able to reduce their anxiety and consequently have a better outcome as a result. And to answer some very common question, yes, everyone can experience it, and it's nothing to do with being asleep, nor is it really to do with being relaxed. In fact, there is no specific feeling whatsoever. It's a little bit like being awake. It's unique for everyone. There's not any woo-woo associated with it, really, although if you look far enough, you'll find it, that's for sure. So I see it as a very natural tool for learning. You might wonder, well, what's the difference between, say, hypnosis and something like meditation? Well, really, the difference is in the imagination part. The imagination is the language of the subconscious, and we know this is true because if any of you smoke or know somebody that smokes, you'll know that they struggle to quit. You'll know that it's very hard because one part of them is saying, I want to quit, but the other part has associated a load of values to smoking: relaxation, boredom, stress relief. All of these things have been associated and have values. And so values are really the highest operator which we work at using hypnosis to help you change those perceptions. Here's a fun exercise. You might have seen this on the internet, and you can type in the chat if you like. What do you see? Do you see a duck? Or do you see the rabbit? You probably notice if you look at it one way, you'll see it as a rabbit. If you look at another way, you'll see it as a duck. So what we got here? Who's winning? Duck? Both? Yeah, both, not at the same time. Exactly. Exactly, yeah. So what's really happening here? Yes, it's an optical illusion, for sure. But you can see how our minds can very easily trick us. It can very easily deceive us into believing that what we see is really what we see, that things really are as they are. So enough talking for the moment. Let's do something kind of fun. So a little practical demonstration here for you. So very, very easy. Okay, take one hand, okay, left or right, and just go like this. Just hold a hand out like this. Okay, then go like this, like waving it like this, just flapping it around. That's it. Okay, then you're going to make a little circle with your finger like this, little circle, little round. Have a good look at it. Okay, and then everybody look at me. Everybody look at me. So you've got your hand like this. Doesn't really matter which position you're going to put in. Then all I like to do is you look at me, follow me, and just place that on your chin. Now, some of you will notice that your hand is not on your chin. It's on your cheek. Chin's here. So I don't do that to say got you or to trick you, but to show you how easy it is for the mind to be convinced into one path. How can we be convinced into one track? You saw everything I did, yet you heard my instructions at the same time. And those of you which followed the audio suggestion of the chin would have placed it here. But those of you who followed the visual direction would have placed it here. Okay, some more fun things we can do with the mind. Oh, wrong one. Let me get back. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So this one, if you have any issues with your arms, with your hands or wrists, anything, sit this one out, okay? Just do it with a friend later, maybe. So place both your hands like this, clasp them together like this, okay? Perfect, okay? Place them together. And then all you're going to do is take your two index fingers or your pointer fingers, as they sometimes say in American English, and put them together so they're touching. So at the moment, your fingers are just touching, facing towards the ceiling like this. All you're going to now do is simply just move those two fingers apart, just like this. Make a nice space. Not too big, not too wide, just enough. And then just imagine, tell yourself in your mind, those fingers are magnets. Imagine them as magnets. And as you imagine them as magnets, see them moving together, closer and closer. And eventually they'll just touch. They'll just touch together automatically. And then once that's happened, just let your hands drop and they can go back to normal, of course. And this also is a bit of a trick. It could seem like that something I am doing is causing you to have your fingers move together. By the way, in the chat, type what happened to your fingers. But what's really happening is that this actually happens by itself. This is a physiological response. But we can add a story to it, and it makes it more believable. We add a story to it, and it seems to be like something is happening. Just like how we can add a story to a context of speaking a foreign language. Maybe we might be thinking about, what does this person really think about me? Are they judging me? Do they think I'm stupid? Do they think that I'm thick? When we add the story, we get a response. We get more of a response happening. So let me show you something else of how just your imagination can create a physical response in the body. And there is no wrong or right answer for this, by the way. So do this. Again, if you have issues with your arms, shoulders, or back, sit this one out. Okay. Good. So, like this, arms straight out in front of you, and then just turn the palm just so it's palm up. Left hand, palm up. Okay, like this. And then close your eyes just for a moment. And with your eyes closed, I'd like you to imagine something. I'd like you to imagine in your mind an old, heavy, foreign language dictionary. Imagine the color of that dictionary. Imagine the shape of it. Imagine the number of pages it has. It's big, it's bulky. On the count of 3, we're just going to drop that dictionary into your left hand. Imagine just sitting there. As we go 1, 2, and 3, start to just notice a sensation which begins in that hand. It just begins to sink, perhaps. It gets heavier and heavier. It just starts to sink down, gets heavier and heavier. Imagine that getting heavier. Imagine 2 dictionaries now. If you imagine 2 dictionaries, notice that just happening. Meanwhile, with your other arm still extended out in front of you like this, keeping your eyes closed, imagine that tied around your wrist, there's a large helium balloon, a big, large helium balloon just floating up into the air, floating higher and higher, lifting further and further. And begin to notice a sensation. Begin to notice a sensation just happening there. It just lifts higher and higher, further and further, more and more. And as you do that, simply just pause, open your eyes, and let your hands relax, and type what happened to you in the chat. And there are 2 real responses, or 3 real responses that will happen here. The first is nothing. The first is nothing, and that's a very valuable response. There's a second response, which would be the arms significantly moved. The other response is one moved more than the other. Okay, so type in the chat, what happened to your arms? Okay, what have we got? Both arms moved, left hand slightly lower, yeah. Left hand started moving downwards, there we go. Okay, yeah. Okay, downwards more than upwards. Let's see, for some, the last exercise, some people came together. Okay, nothing really good. Okay, left hand moved that, yeah, very normal. Nothing, good. Okay, so for those that experience nothing, you've got a very interesting insight, because a part of your mind knows there is no, there's no dictionary, there's no balloon in your hand. And so it's very easy for it to say, no, it's not happening. Nope, it's not happening. Which is kind of an interesting skill, because whenever we're faced with some stress, some anxiety, that's also an interesting skill to be able to do, to say, well, the very fact that you're thinking it means it's not happening. Think about that. For those of you who experience some movement there, also a very useful skill. It shows you're able to engage your imagination very vividly. You can engage yourself in experiences. You can wrap yourself in experiences. It's great for immersion. So these are just fun little exercises to show you how the mind can affect the body and how each of us will have different responses, because we're all different, right? We'll have different experiences, different levels of understanding. So how does this stuff really work in practice? Really, the areas where hypnosis can be useful for you is if you're nervous when you're speaking. Maybe you know the words, but something is just preventing you from saying what you mean. You kind of get it technically. Maybe you can't see the bigger picture. Maybe some people wonder, well, why am I doing this? Maybe you have students that don't really see the interest in learning a language, you know, especially in the UK. Many people think, well, everyone speaks English anyway, don't they? Yeah, until you go somewhere where they don't. Maybe you feel overwhelmed by all this grammar, by the whole thing about how it's so different. Maybe you find yourself procrastinating, putting off studying. Maybe you need some more confidence to actually go out there and practice. The key, I think, to learning a language is really about practice and be willing to make mistakes as well. So let me talk about a couple of cases which have come up in my professional world. And here we have a quite interesting one where we have what I call a good technician, somebody that really knows a lot. They know many languages, but they're good on paper, but put them in a professional environment and the nerves kick in, the anxiety kicks in, the doubt kicks in, and they lose that ability, which looks good on paper. They can understand, they can do a lot, but the speaking isn't where it should be. And this is all down to responses which have been learned in the past. You know, maybe when we're young, we get scared, and this carries through into adulthood. So after just a few little sessions, this particular client was able just to move on and to start to really enjoy speaking and practicing and enjoy learning languages. The other one which I have for you is the long-time learner. Somebody who's learning French for a long, long time, decades. They've always been told something which is quite damaging. They say that you're kind of slow. You're a slow learner. And they felt so much overwhelm and anxiety. And it's little wonder that they made no progress, because when we're under pressure, when we're feeling a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, this takes up a lot of space. This takes up a lot of tension. And so It's no wonder they didn't get anywhere. So after just a few little sessions together, their anxiety reduced, and they've actually started to really enjoy the conversation rather than being constantly anxious the whole time. So, what can you do? Now, you don't technically need to see a hypnotherapist like me, okay? There's actually a lot of things which you can do yourself. And one of those things is called self-hypnosis, and which is, as it says on the tin, it's the art of hypnotizing yourself. So anyone who is of relatively good mental health can benefit from this. It might be that you want to rehearse a job interview, a speaking exam. You want to be more focused, you want to boost your motivation, but you want to sleep better. Sleep is also very valuable and powerful for memory and recollection. So self-hypnosis is a technique you can apply yourself, like mindfulness, like meditation, but really focused on using that imaginative part of your mind. And it's actually very simple to do. And I teach this in audio and in a group class, but really it boils down to this. It's finding a practice of about 5 minutes a day to start with. But you'll find a technique you like to take yourself into a relaxed, calm, focused state. You'll set yourself a time limit. You'll set your intention. And that means, what do I want? What do I want to achieve? Why am I doing this? And the best way to set your intention is to focus on what you want in the positive, not in the negative. Like if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, notice what happens. But as you set your intention, you say, each day I'm becoming more confident or more curious or more at ease. You can use that as your intention. And then you'll say to yourself, how do you want to feel immediately afterwards? So awake, refreshed, energized. Or if you're using this at night to go to sleep, you want to drift into a natural sleep. So there's really just 3 steps to achieving this self-hypnosis once you find a technique which you like. So because I can't see everyone in this interaction today, I'm not going to do like a mass hypnosis exercise on people, but I have a little goodie for you. And that little goodie is a free audio, which you can download just by following the link here you see on the screen or scanning the handy QR code. And this is a 10 minutes audio. There's no weird music. You just simply listen to it and it'll help you get in the zone. And it's a good one to try out, give it a go and to see how it changes your experience. So you might choose to use this, for example, if you're about to do some grammar exercises. You might use it if you're about to watch something on Netflix or listen to a podcast. This you can use very, very widely, and it's available for free. So go and grab it. And I also see people in one-to-one settings and in group settings where I teach them some self-hypnosis which they can apply themselves. So that concludes what I have for you today. I'm going to leave this up, so no panic. But if you do have some questions, drop them in the Q&A, and I will do my best to answer them. So, yes, so good question. Do you find some clients are just too resistant to hypnosis? It's not so much resistance, it's more that it's maybe not the technique for them. There's nothing to resist. I always say to people that this is a collaboration. This is teamwork, you know. There is sometimes a misconception that I'm going to do something to you and you will respond, where actually it's more of a loop. It's more of a psychodynamic loop between 2 people. It's an exploration in a one-to-one setting. There are some people for sure where it's just not the right solution for them. Some people, they will greatly benefit. But the good news is we tend to find that out pretty quickly. How many languages do you speak, and have you used these techniques on yourself? Of course. So I speak 4 languages: English, French, German, Dutch. And I do use these techniques. I use these techniques pretty much several times a week. I use them for sleep. I use them for goals. These are really versatile stuff that you can use, of course. Okay. Any other questions? So perhaps listen to change, then hypnosis itself. Yes, that's also possible, for sure. Again, make sure that you type them in the Q&A box so I can see them. What we got here? How long does a live session take, and can you do it online? Good question. A live session, the first session tends to be about 90 minutes, and then the next ones tend to be about an hour. It depends. And yes, it can be done online. As long as you can hear me, that's all we need. The change happens in your head, not because of a certain context or certain setting. It happens in your mind. So of course, just need to be able to hear somebody. Any other questions? Thank you for these questions. They're good. Good one here. How can I convince my teenage daughter to be more open to hypnosis for sleep problems? This is a good question. There's a lot of things here, and I don't know anything about you. So what I would say is that your daughter has to, it depends on, first of all, it depends on the age of your daughter. Actually, teenager, okay, so that's okay. But she has to want to be able to change. She has to want to, should be willing to approach something like this. Now, it's also worthwhile perhaps demystifying hypnosis a little bit, just like I've done in this presentation today, and see it more like just an exploration. It's not making people do anything. It's more seeing how people can change and how they can respond to certain ideas. Yeah, it's not a do-to process. It's quite fun as well. I've got lots of techniques for younger people, which is more like a game, really, you know. But I would say don't put too much pressure on her either. That can also work against you. If there's too much pressure, it kind of gets in the way. Yeah. And it's not necessarily that, depends on the issue as well. Some sleep problems, it's worth first seeing a doctor first. So yeah, but if you do have questions on that in more detail, just feel free to get in contact with me through my website. I'm happy to have a chat. What's the most common barrier to language that you come across? Common barrier to language learning, I think, is the perception that they're never going to be good at it. They're never going to be fluent. People often take language classes and they just do it. They just think, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it because I should. But that's not enough. It's not enough to find a real passion for language learning. So I think the biggest barrier is perhaps education, is in seeing the true value in learning a language. Next question here. Would you advise hypnosis as a tool for a learner with dyslexia? Maybe. It depends on their ability to focus. Everyone's different, right? It's very difficult to answer. Maybe. It's always the answer for that. And how did I get into hypnotherapy? Very good question. As I said, I started more in the entertainment side of things. And as I went into it, I discovered, oh, actually there's something more behind this than just little tricks. And it fascinated me. It fascinated me seeing people with decades-long phobias just simply vanish, how habits could just change very, very quickly without having to go to years and years and years and years of sessions, but to have it happen very, very quickly there and then. And it's been a fantastic journey, and it's something which, yeah, has a lot of interesting opinions about it. So I love it. Any other questions before we wrap this up? We've got about 5 minutes left. feel free. So before I go, just like to thank you all for joining today. And as a reminder, go and grab the free audio. It's an opportunity for you to experience something perhaps different, something new. And if you do have further questions which pop up, of course, after this talk, you're always welcome to get in contact with me. I will be putting the slides available for you so you can look at them later, and also my contact details if you'd like to contact me. All right. No more questions. That's a wrap. Merci. Vielen Dank. Tschüss.